The world of mainstream media and news sources can often be quite overwhelming. Constantly, we hear of media bias, fake news, misinformation, and various other issues that permeate news consumption. We've witnessed the increasing consequences of falling prey to the spread of fake news. We watched as believers of conspiracy theories stormed the Capitol building during the January 6th insurrection. We've seen politicians win campaigns over claims found to be unfactual. These issues are clearly quite serious, but to an uninformed viewer, are often difficult to identify. Even for the most politically fluent news viewers, identifying fake news and biases can be challenging due to their often subtle natures. Most people feel helpless, not even knowing where to begin when dealing with misinformation. In an effort to simplify the process, we've compiled a list of ways to evaluate news sources for these issues. You might be surprised how often you'll end up using these tips when out in the real world of mass media consumption. First, choosing a source. Before even beginning to assess the content of a given news source, you must begin by evaluating the news source itself. But what actually makes a solid and reliable news source? In choosing a source, ask yourself, who is the author? Knowing who the author is can immediately indicate whether a source is reliable. Let's use a couple of examples to demonstrate this. Let's say you find a source describing how climate change is not real. Though many would immediately believe that this is likely filled with false information, this belief can easily be confirmed by examining who the author is. You look at the author and find that it is Josh Smith, a plumber lacking a college degree and any scientific experience giving validity to his claims. Though having a certain degree is not required to speak on an issue, the lack of one and experience on the issue is a clear indication that information may not be reliable. Next, you're reading an article coming from the Washington Post that features a prominent climate scientist discussing recent changes in rising ocean levels. This is an indication that the information is more likely to be accurate, and it's coming from an expert on the subject. It's being reported in a prominent and respected newspaper. You can further research and read reviews about the scientist to further evaluate the veracity of their claims. Next, ask yourself, does the source have known biases? Sometimes, just knowing whether the source historically has biases can be enough to inform how you should read an article. For example, sources like Fox News and MSNBC are known for leaning far right and far left, respectively. This knowledge can help readers to take a pause as they read their articles and to think critically about the source's intentions. The second tip is to ask, what are the source's intentions? There are a variety of different reasons why a given source may have a bias, but let's take a look at a few of the most common. Profit or power gain. Some sources receive significant financial contributions and advances from reporting on issues in a particular way that benefits the people providing this money. Fox News and CNN are common examples of this, receiving significant funding from members of the Republican and Democrat parties, respectively, in return for reporting about them in a positive light. Subconscious or ingrained biases. Often, biases that appear in articles and on TV shows are not any different from those most people possess. These may be biases that think negatively or positively about a specific group of people or political party. There may be obvious signs of confirmation bias, bias-loaded words, one-sided verbiage, and other biases that commonly permeate our society. If these biases are the rationale for negative coverage of a certain person or group, it may be good to look further into the article. This can be done by using Biasly's AI ratings, found on its website, biasly.com. Factual obligations. Most respected and reliable news sources operate under an obligation to report facts as they understand and obtain them. This does not mean that a news source being reliable can never be wrong, but rather its focus should try to be less wrong, doing their best to provide the most accurate information. This is helpful when considering which sources do not have these obligations. Sources such as public forums, Reddit, 4chan, etc., Wikipedia, personal blogs, and other similar sources with user-to-user sharing modalities are not being fact-checked. This is one of the most common ways for misinformation to spread. Finally, what are tools you can use to help identify bias and inaccuracy? Though the internet can often be a scary place, filled with misinformation, it can also be a place of ingenuity and resources for confronting these very issues. Biasly is one of these resources, specifically dedicated to identifying the biases of news sources and evaluating them for how accurate they are. To learn more about how Biasly can help you identify biased news sources and misinformation, visit biasly.com.